So I want to become a manager, uh, or at least that is the option that is in front of me after some 4 or 5 years of working right now. So that there is this path that opens up in our field, in actually not just in our field, like in general software engineering, where you can either choose to be a engineering manager, that track of managing people, or you can be a individual contributor where you're still just managing tech for the most part. And I know that you have been on this track a little bit earlier than me, and you have been thinking about this a lot. So first off, have you chosen what you want to be? Do you, yeah, have you chosen between manager and IC?
No, straight answer is no, I haven't. Um, Still thinking about different pros and cons of each, what I actually want to do, etc. I
Hmm.
think I'm nearing to a conclusion, but I don't have a solid answer yet.
So how long has this process been for you? Like how long have you been thinking about this?
I haven't been actively thinking about this. It's been just something on the back of my mind right now.
Hmm.
But I think I started thinking of this, I think maybe from a year.
Hmm.
It started off when my manager had asked me the same question. Like, you would have to, basically, he came and told me that your next level up will require you to decide whether you want to be an IC or an EM. And let's start thinking about that. So that's
Hmm.
when I actually started putting in this thought.
So when you start off, so why is there even a differentiation? Like why is there a fork in the career path here? Why not? Why don't people just start being a manager, like start from like product managers and just keep going?
So yeah, I mean, two-part answer to this. The product manager line, I think that would be a completely different area because they are not technical. And I
Hmm.
think the main requirement here is that there is a requirement in certain type of companies where you need previously a technical person who continues to be technical, but who is actively engaged in people management, project management, etc. That's what I understand it to be.
So the engineering manager is still distinct from a product manager, purely on the technical side of things. Like the product managers don't quite understand the intricacies of the work that we do.
Uh, yes. So your product managers, I mean, again, there are product managers, there are program managers, and so on. So
Hmm.
from that, basically that particular bucketing, how I understand it to be is your program managers are basically your liaisons between your product managers and your tech teams.
Hmm.
They basically handle the communication, the handling of the project per se.
Hmm.
How is the project being executed? What are the milestones? How is the progress communicated to leaders, to other stakeholders? What are the blockers? If there are blockers, how do you resolve the blockers? What are the dependencies between each teams, etc. This is
Hmm.
what I believe program managers are supposed to handle. And again, product managers, program managers, managers, their job descriptions, it's very much up in the air from what I believe. So there could be differences based on what different companies do.
Hmm.
So that's program managers. Product managers basically are more involved into the product element, like what is the product they're building, what are the features that that product would require, does those features make sense, etc. So it's more of
Hmm.
a product business related responsibilities that they have. And engineering managers are primarily people who I think actually enforce the software engineering principles that we have learned back in school,
Hmm.
back in college.
Hmm.
You basically how do you basically run a project, or how do you basically run a task or a problem statement? Do you basically do a waterfall on top of it? Do you do agile? In either case, basically, what are the different steps in a software development process that someone has to stick to? Being an IC, people can tend to be very much focused in their tasks from a pure code standpoint of view.
Hmm.
That okay, this is my ticket or this is my task. I basically find my way around it. I basically write code, I build my systems, I deploy it, and I'm done. But I
Hmm.
think engineering managers has a little more umbrella view of what is happening across the org, because they are I think that's the major difference between IC and EM in my head. So EM may have a lot more context over the business and what's actually required from the team to be done,
Hmm.
and they basically try to act as that player in the whole team where you have uh, where basically they contribute by bringing in the business context, what is actually required, how is the other team collaboration happening, and all of that. So I think they bring in the technical aspect to all of that, which basically helps the individual contributors or the team to build what they want.
Where does the people part come in? So we haven't talked about people yet. So in my head, engineering managers always had a lot of people-facing responsibilities as compared to, say,
Yes,
an IC.
yes. So I think the people-facing stuff is a tradition that is purely and I think historically coming in just because of the number of people that has to work together. So if it's
Hmm.
like a very small company, let's say 10 people, 12 people, maybe up to going to 30, 40 people, uh, broken down into different teams, you don't actually need managers, I guess, because people generally interact very closely with each other. Even the founders would be peers among the people that are working, and they generally sit together, communicate, and get things done.
Hmm.
But as the team size grows, I think the communication is broken. Team A does not know what Team B is doing, and even the leaders or the leadership people, they would not know what individual people are working on. And I think that barrier is what engineering managers also try to come in and close from a people point of view. And obviously, there are the usual responsibilities like your team reviews, team performances, your one-on-ones, ensuring that each people uh, are working on things that helps them progress in their career,
Hmm.
etc. So I think that's something that's the people component of your engineering managers for engineering
So
managers. So that
yeah, so that's interesting, right? Because in my previous company, when I joined, it was a very small company. We were just starting up. And then when they started introducing managers, before the managers came in, like engineering managers came in, we were operating as a couple of people in the back end team, couple of people in the front end team, and all of us used to talk with each other. And it just felt unnecessary having more people in the mix, having to communicate. But there was this other article that I was also reading about this. It actually goes into the meta of, do we even need engineering managers? And one thing that they bring up is that communication is key. It's not that communication breaks down at a bigger size company. It's just that it's almost impossible to have the full context. So it kind of makes sense that you have teams and you have managers for the teams who are essentially doing relevant information only kind of communication, so that your bandwidth is mostly freed up to do your tasks, whatever those tasks are.
huh, th- that that seems like a very crisp requirement for a engineering manager large scale. Then yes, it
Just
essentially frees up the people's mind space, and they just get into what task they have to do. Yeah, correct.
at what point do you think, say you are building a company, at what point do you think you will start introducing managers, like in number of people in a team? Let's say you're building a data science company and you have a team of three machine learning engineers. At which point do you start introducing managers?
I am not well equipped to answer this question because I've not done anything as such.
Hmm.
But like from a very first principle point of view, if I would have to solve this, I would not have a thumb rule or any sort of a number after which I would try to introduce managers, and primarily go with the team that I have. Uh,
Hmm.
we'll all start collaborating, start working together, and and as the team grows, the moment I feel that there is miscommunication, there is some sort of gap between teams, I think that's when That's the trigger that I would look for to introduce to fill that with managers.
How do you find this? So miscommunication is your signal saying that okay, the communication is not happening with as much what's the word, bandwidth, something, as much as well as possible. So what are you looking for when you say miscommunication? Like misses in deadlines, work not being efficient enough?
Uh, mm, co- Using the word communication for this is maybe just a very small portion of the picture. I might be missing out on a lot of the key elements which
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mentioning right now. But
Mm,
I would primarily look for, look for missing deadlines, whether actually the project is not being done well. Are there dependencies that people are not realizing, and then they're just building it
mm,
to, and towards the end they realize there are blockers, and then they have to go back to the drawing board. If there was someone who knew both these structures together,
mm,
and that person is able to map out these dependencies in the first place and chart out a plan, that would have been much more smoother for anyone working together. So things like that is something that I might look for. Uh, and what else am I missing? Um,
I think that's the key. So, like managers freeing up the bandwidth also has the corollary that they have a broader bird's eye view of everything that's happening. That's very helpful, and they can take care of the bird's eye view stuff, like inter team communication, while the team themselves are focused on their tasks, so that they don't have to worry about, say, missing deadlines and something. They can be the glue between the teams essentially.
That is correct, yes. And one other element that if I am a founder, and this is just knowledge that I have been gotten from many different articles that I've read, is
Hmm.
that if I'm a founder and I need to know what people are doing, I can only go and talk to each person and get to understand what they're doing if the company is small.
Hmm.
If the company grows, I will not be able to go and invest my time in individual tasks, individual Jira boards, individual projects, etc. Just because I may not have the time for doing it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I will have a lot of other things that I have to do. So at this point, I probably would hire people who would be my point of contact, and it would be it's basically me delegating this task of getting to know what's happening to them, and I
Hmm.
just have to maybe meet with 3 4 people to understand what the entire company is doing. Ideally that would be my thought process. And if their tasks get overwhelming, then they might hire more people under them to basically delegate further down.
Hmm.
So, I mean, at this point, there's also a question of how much far you let them delegate down, so that I mean, it's very easy for them to delegate to new people. Them again putting it further down the line, creating a whole tree structure which can go very deep, right? And there's also a question
Hmm.
of how deep should you let it grow.
I mean, do
I
you
don't
have
have
a
an answer.
choice though? Like, if you're again, all of this is hypothetical, right? So, if you're building a company and you are noticing that you are getting into this hierarchy is just, isn't that an okay, fancy
Necessity.
words? Isn't that a emergent property of the system itself? It is a necessity of the uh, population within the company. You can't have a flat structure of let's say 2 3 level deep if you have some 20,000 people.
I don't know the right answer here. Possible that it's an emergent property, and then this is there is nothing wrong with it, and this is how we'll have to run it.
Hmm.
Or it could also be possible that once you have such a, I mean, I'm thinking of it from a pure machine learning point of view, right? Because that's what we do. So
Hmm.
let's say you have a very deep tree. At one point, you would know that you may not need the entire tree for what you're doing, and you can
Hmm.
simply prune off certain branches because you know that's being redundant at this point.
Hmm.
So eventually, I could look at is the entire tree necessary? Should I just remove certain nodes here and there? And then that could possibly lead to a smaller tree, or it could also lead to a structure where things are much more flat at up to one point, and that works for us. It
Hmm.
could be as such.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking as we speak at this point.
Got it. Fair. What happened to your this one though? So you said that you're not chosen yet. So one thing that comes up is when does this typically happen? This junction where you have to choose between these two paths. This is very, I mean, it reminds me of school when we had to choose between biology and computer science, and after a point, like we are set into that stream. Like at this point, it's going to be very hard for me to jump to the other branch. I can't go into bio and do medicine, right? So, is it the case here? When did you have to make a choice? Like, what was your timeline like?
Um, yeah, I mean, I still have a long way to go to get to that, I guess. So it's traditionally, I mean, your analogy of your science versus biology, it's pretty much the same. Computers versus biology, I guess. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's not as strict as in your educational side, would say, but
Hmm.
yeah, it does come at a certain milestone. So for traditional engineers, I think it differs very highly company to company. But
Hmm.
from the places that I've been, it's primarily you have your SD1, SD2, SD3,
Hmm.
and after SD3, you basically have a choice of basically continuing that path in that individual contributor role and going SD4. Then I think you have staff engineer, you have your senior staff engineer, principal engineer, and so on.
Hmm.
And after HD3, if you choose to become a manager, it would basically be an associate engineering manager, director, and so on. So I think that's the fork happening at the SD3 level. Could be SD4 in some other places, and some other places even don't have the 1, 2, 3, 4 structure, right? They have senior engineer, software engineer, senior software engineer, and so on.
Hmm.
So I think after in general after the senior SC roles, that's where this happens. And for us data scientists, machine learning engineers, it's pretty much the same. So you have your DST, DS1, 2, 3, and then you could either be a DS4 or a research scientist and staff research scientist and so on.
Hmm.
And on the management part, it could basically be your I think it's directly starts with director. I guess I've not seen any other manager roles apart
Where does
from,
the
I mean,
principal and all come in? Is that individual contributor?
principal, that is individual contributor. Yes. Principal, distinguished fellow, etc. That's individual contributor. And on
Hmm.
your IC yeah, management side, I usually see director, senior director, VP, and so on.
Hmm. So, this transition, is it typically happening within a company saying that you were at an SD3 and SD4, or is it also possible for you to go from a company as SD4 and as a manager into another company? Is that something people do?
It is something people do. I've seen it happening. I've seen senior engineers go into companies to become directors.
Hmm.
So it is possible. That's why I said it's not as strict as in your educational analogy that you brought up.
So you
Even
can
within a
shift between the, so if you have chosen to be an IC and you become, let's say, principal, at some point you can say that, fine, I want to try the managerial route and do engineering manager stuff also.
yes, like short answer is yes. I mean because I've seen such examples personally.
Hmm.
But I think the key here is that just because you're being in the IC side uh, uh, does not mean you don't have the capabilities to do your management stuff. I think it boils down to what you want. Because even being an IC, like let's say post staff level, your staff, senior staff, principal,
Hmm.
IC does not actually mean the ideal life that we would want to be in, right? Like you sit in a corner, no one to talk to, and simply code away your solutions and then bring changes to the world. I don't think it works that way. They still have people to mentor, may not have an official management sort of profile, but they still have to basically do one-on-ones with people. They still have to mentor people. They still have to make sure that people are doing stuff the right way. So there's still some people component associated with ICs. Just
Hmm.
that I don't think they have to do your usual performance reviews, your one-on-ones for people career progress and stuff like that. And in
Hmm.
terms of moving from your IC to your EM part somewhere else or in the same company, I think people will probably gauge you on how well you're able to do it. Or do you have any experience in your previous role that basically said that even though you were a principal, you did have maybe a small team under you, or you
Hmm.
did show something, some skills or some evidence that. you were able to lead a team and bring success out of it. So I think with such examples or evidences, I think you still can jump to the director or the EM path. What I have seen mostly from again my friend circle, seniors, etc., is people trying to do the other way. Try being an EM,
Hmm.
being a senior manager, associate manager, director, trying to jump to the to the IC side.
Why?
So that again is they primarily, I mean, at least from what people I've talked to, the general answers that I usually get is that they are technical people by themselves, like they want to be technical.
Hmm.
They ended up being in a management position just because of the situations in their organization, the
Hmm.
way their managers wanted to push them forward, etc.
Hmm.
And they also might have simply wanted to try out the management path because why not? And then
Hmm.
maybe after a year or two of trying it out, they realize that this is not what I want to be doing. I want to be more technical, more hands-on. With I keep saying that more technical, but I don't think managers are less technical. Yes, just I think a bias that I have when I'm simply talking about it. But
Hmm.
like more hands-on would be the right term here.
Hmm.
So yeah, they decide to be more technical, more hands-on. Sorry again, more hands-on, and then they might try to make that switch. But here, when I talk to these people, they mention it to be much harder than doing the other way, just because when you are in a management role, you generally don't have a lot of projects where you have sat and built it yourself, right? And
Hmm.
that would be missing from your resumes, your profiles when you do discussions with the companies, etc. So it probably gets harder for you to sell yourself as someone who can actually get coding and get things done. So if you do that well, I think you would be able to move to an IC role and then try to progress from there. But yeah, I think that's also possible.
So you
Jumping
you you bring up a good
patches.
point about people being judged on their, let's say, coding things for being considered for IC roles, right? But what about the other case? Like for instance, in your software development or even machine learning, you have these kind of set patterns in your interview. So you have a technical round, you have a coding round, you have a system design round. What do you think are the rounds for a manager? What are they being judged on apart from their anecdotes about what they have done?
I don't know. I think it still stays same as your IC interviews for a long part.
Hmm.
I do not know about how conversations happen from a director plus level onwards. Uh, what I've heard is when you have directors interviewing for your team, they generally have quote unquote discussions with leaders and then they get hired. I really
Hmm.
have no idea what the discussions are.
Hmm.
But I think at least till a senior manager or a manager level, they still at some companies or usually at most companies they still get judged on coding, your system design, etc. Because
Hmm.
they are not pure people managers. They are technical engineering managers. So they need to bring in the engineering component of their title, right? So
Hmm.
that basically means are they still able to code? Because if they are not able to code and the team under them is coding, they have no idea what the team is coding. So it can't be that way. So I think coding, system design, uh, best practices, more of your software engineering principles, I think that could be judged more heavily. That could be something that these guys are judged more heavily on. Uh, yeah, but I
Hmm.
think that still they still have to go through some technical process. Again, yeah, I have no idea, but I'm just this from what I heard.
Hmm. Fair. Okay, so going back to our initial point of discussion, like, did you have a pros and cons list of what are you looking for when you are choosing between engineering manager and the individual contributor?
I don't have a solid pros and cons list for both yet, but I have certain experiences and certain stuff that I've jotted down that is helping me get to an answer. I'm not there yet. I
Hmm.
can go through that if you want that.
Yeah, no, what do you mean you're not there yet? So isn't this like what you sit for half an hour, jot down everything, give a weightage to each, and just choose? Why is it taking so long?
Uh, I want to be sure. I mean, it's about what I actually want. I mean, it's like let's say buying a Lego set, right? I want a Millennium Falcon, and I also want let's say So some of the huge Legos, let's say the Harry Potter's
Hmm.
Hogwarts set.
Hmm.
I want both, but if I have to choose between one, how would I choose it? I don't know.
Hmm.
So it's like that for me. I could have pros and cons of each. One is Star Wars, my one of my favorite franchises. One is Harry Potter, which is one of my favorite franchises when I was a kid.
Hmm.
And then you have number of pieces, how aesthetic it looks, do I have shelf space for each of them, etc. So even though I can create a table for it, at the end of the day, it will come down to what I actually want, like emotionally,
Hmm.
and I may not have a straightforward answer in 30 minutes.
Fair. ठीक है.
And plus, I may not even have enough dimensions to fill my table with. Like Lego is a
Hmm.
trivial example in that case, but with respect to ICEM, I have been majorly working in one company since I graduated, and my entire world revolves around what an IC and what an EM does at that company. And I
Hmm.
don't want to be basing my pros and cons list purely based on that because it's clear bias there, right? I don't know what's happening outside. I might have a strong tendency to lean towards a particular role here just because I may not like the way the other counterpart is working here, but that
Hmm.
might actually be a much better position to be in outside this company. So
Hmm.
so I have to talk to people. I have to make sure I really know what I want, like introspect a lot, and then bring it out. But yeah, I
Fair.
think I'm very close. But yeah, I just want to make sure that I do a last mile decision making here.
Got it. So let's say the top two advantages of taking on a EM role. What do you see them as?
Top
Like,
two
why
advantages.
is it? Let's not call it advantages. Why is it interesting to do? Let's say.
It is interesting to do one if you have set in your mind that you don't want to be sitting behind a computer or rather like 3 4 monitors every day and
Hmm.
writing code for most of your life. If you have decided that you don't want to be doing that, you want to be involved in a lot more management style work, you want to be much closer to the leadership, you want to be much closer to how the companies run the business side of it,
Hmm.
then I think EM is what I would be choosing. Uh, like you get more involved with
Hmm.
the priorities of the company, you start thinking company first, you have to you become a more of a people person, you have to think about your team, you have to make sure that the team is happy. You're basically running a mini army that can do stuff for you, right?
Hmm.
So if that's the expectation, uh, then yeah, then EM is something that you would want to pick. Versus an IC is basically pretty much I would kind of call these as geeks, right? Are you're basically a nerd, a geek that wants to sit in a basement somewhere, write systems, build libraries that people just start using, and
I mean,
you're
to
dealing
a
with.
point, right? Like even after one point, you have to interact with your like bigger team members, even if you're an architect.
Correct, you have to interact, but I think that most of your decisions or most of your interactions are still technical. They are not
Hmm.
going to interact with you asking what is the right pivot for a company. I think the discussion would be that considering this is the pivot, what technical challenges does it bring in? How would you architect the system? I think it
Hmm.
still get fairly technical even at that level. That you might be responsible for an entire domain.
Hmm.
Let's say that a company is doing recommendation systems and you are an architect of the recommendation system, meaning that you basically have to deal with the end-to-end thing. Like we're talking about the normal software engineering system design, the ML
Hmm.
system design, how both interact with each other. What are the explanations that you have to give out to people? Does it maintain latencies? Does it basically help out your user experience? I think at that level, discussion would be abstract, would be more of architecting systems,
Hmm.
but it's still fairly technical in my head at least.
Got it. So I see if you want to continue being a specialist in your tech, want to work mostly focused on your own work, a little bit less on the people interactions, but that still exists, but mostly the discussions revolve around, say, your technical aspects of it. And EM, when you have want a broader view of things, closer to the company's vision, trying to uh, get into more of the managerial people aspects. Is that fair?
I guess yes, fair.
Hmm. What about money though? Last point. Like, is there a difference in the kind of growth that you can see in your salary itself?
Uh, I okay, that's a very interesting question. So I'll cover both salary and the career growth part.
Hmm.
Both are kind of separate here, I would say. So at least in India, I've seen most companies promoting your EM style culture than IC style culture.
Hmm.
So there are not a lot of companies that have like distinguished positions, fellow positions, senior staff positions, etc. But they do have senior managers and so on.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, I might have to spend another 30 minutes talking about this because this is an interesting conversation.
Okay. So like opportunity wise, at least there is a lot more in the engineering manager track, you'd say.
Blind answer would be yes. Sure.
Hmm. Fair. Fair. Okay. Do
What
we
do you want
have?
to do?
Good question. So I haven't reached that stage yet where I am being pushed for a decision yet. But I don't know. Like right now, it feels like I want to be a technical person, but also I want that broader vision of what is happening in the company, and I want to like direct the company. So both of them have their own advantages or interests.